Okay. So the talk I'm going to give is about making money from photography. Um, and when I thought about that, what are the opportunities as a photographer? The main way that people make money is doing portraits, weddings, products. That's what I would call a traditional professional photographer. The stock photography. And there's selling photographic prints, which can be either online or gallery or art show. What I'm going to talk about today is primarily stock photography, but I'll also talk about the selling of prints, fine art prints. As I said, ask me any questions you like. As I'm going through at the end, I'm not short of time. I've nowhere to go, no travel. Okay. So what is a stock photograph? Well, it's a photograph that already exists, so that if someone has a need for a particular photograph, they can either employ a photographer to take it, or they can look at what's already available. And what's already available is essentially a stock photo. So it's these days an online and searchable database. People use them for websites, obviously, prints, calendars, greeting cards, magazines, newspapers, advertising products. So really anything where you see a photograph these days is quite often a stock photograph. And Vince Vaughn a couple of years ago did some cheesy examples of what a stock photograph looked like. And I've got my very own one, which has sold once. So somewhere out there is a picture of me smiling with a headset. So that's my own cheesy version. But they're a lot broader than just these sort of people shaking hands or smart people in offices and so on. And here's one that I took as I was strolling along the beach in Hawaii once, and I just saw all these colorful surfboards standing up there against the blue sky, and I thought, oh, that's a nice picture, I'll take that. And that particular one has earned $1,720. And let me explain why all these numbers are here. Often you hear or stock photographers writing about how good things are or how bad things are, but they never ever say what they actually mean by that. Is that they used to make $10 and now they make $5, or they made 10,000 and now it's 5,000. And so right from the start, I started publishing my numbers because I've nothing really to hide. I properly report them to the IRS and pay tax on them. So it helps people understand whether it's worth getting into, rather than just a simple, oh yeah, I've doubled my money this year. So that's why these numbers are there. And I also think it's sort of interesting seeing how much pictures that this was just a grab shot walking by, how much you can actually make from pictures that I'm sure you've got in your own portfolios. So this one, as I say, is 1,700, and I found a couple of uses. I'm sure there are many uses of it, but one on San Diego, I don't know what the other one was, killer summer workouts. And then I thought, well, I can cut out bits of this. I'm pretty good with Photoshop. So stick it against the beach, stick it against a white background, stick it against some waves. And so that one image has probably earned, I don't know, $3,560 by reusing it onto other products. And you could say, well, couldn't the buyer do that? Couldn't the designer do that? And I think in the past they could. I think what I now see of the sort of buyers of stock photos is that they simply want a picture to use immediately. They may have the skills to do this sort of thing, but probably they don't. They simply want a photo, and a photo against a particular beach, or a photo with a wave in the background. So they look for that. They don't sort of say to themselves, oh, I could get one isolated against white and I could composite onto something else. And, so try and meet as many needs of the buyers as you possibly can, or that's what I was trying to do with this. My best seller is actually a cat. You'd think, well, goodness, how many cats are there on the internet? But this was a particularly nice cat, or nice looking cat, and a good picture of it's the one on the right, and there's an example of it being used. And I uploaded this in 2011. It's, you know, I've been doing this since 2008. It sold 3,900 times and has earned $4,338. So around $1 per sale is the sort of average price, which raises the question, is that all a photo is worth, you know, $1 these days? And when you think about the good old days of stock photography, and this is where many currently professional photographers used to upload their negatives, or provide the negatives, I should say, to stock agencies. And the stock agencies had to do a lot of work. They had to, you know, put them in files, they had to search through them, they had to send a physical copy to the user. Magazines and newspapers in those days made profits, and so images were actually licensed at pretty high sums of money, hundreds of dollars, for a specific use. So a specific use in a magazine, or a specific use in a newspaper. And people made some pretty good money. The professional photographers of the day made some pretty good money out of stock photography. But that's pretty much behind us. That the world has totally changed since those, what you could call the good old days. And why they earn so little now is partly digitalization, and the internet makes this information, you know, or these images available to everyone very easily. The competition that you're fighting against is often that people find things on Google Images and download them and use them, which isn't, you know, legal for them to do that, but, you know, what's the chance of them being caught? There's an oversupply of high quality images. If you look on Shutterstock, which is the biggest of the stock agencies, there are 3 million images of cats. And quite a lot of them are rubbish in my mind, but there's quite a lot of good images of cats that you can find. The industry is global because people can take a photograph of a cat in any country in the world. And obviously in some countries, people are happy to work for less than we would think reasonable in the US. There's a fair number of photographers willing to work for exposure, you know, whatever that means, on free stock sites. There are various stock sites which allow you to download the image for free, and the photographers have uploaded them and seem to get satisfaction from having 50,000 downloads of their image, but obviously earn nothing for the use of that image. So there's all those negatives. But the positive is that there are many more uses of images. Images are all around us. Videos, which I'll come on to a little bit, are also all around us on various websites, news, you know, blogs, online news, ads, all the rest of it. So there are many, many more uses, but there are lots of, you know, low price competition. The next point to make is, and I keep talking about sold because it's an easy word, but strictly speaking, images are licensed. They're not sold, and they're licensed non-exclusively, so that the same image of mine can go to many different agencies. They're all non-exclusive to me, and all they are providing is a digital download of the image with a license to use it. So there's no limit to the number of times an image can be licensed. It's not like I painted a picture and I'm trying to sell it. Once I've sold that painted picture, it's gone. These images can be sold an infinite number of times. And obviously they can continue to sell for many years after they were first uploaded. Some of them will lose their potential because they'll look old-fashioned, or they're something that maybe that people don't want to use anymore. But I made this way back in 2000. Yeah.
Just real quick, will you be talking about the different sites that you use to sell your photos?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
We had a question about that, so that's upcoming.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this one, and it's not a good picture. It's something that I took in 2008, and that's about the best I could take at the time, but still sells. It's sort of, you know, supposed to be looking for a rosy future or something like that. So, you know, images continue to sell, in this case, for 12, 13, 14 years after they were first uploaded. How they're sold now is this very poorly named royalty-free license, which suggests that it's free because it says royalty-free. But what it actually means is that it's licensed to someone and they can use it an unlimited number of times. Whereas in the past, an image was licensed for a specific use, a specific magazine issue. Now it's licensed to someone and they can use it in a magazine today and in a website tomorrow. And so it's in effect royalty free for future uses by that purchaser. And there are licenses for web use. And obviously this is a size question for print use. But if they want to use it on a product, then that's the most expensive license that generally people buy. Shutterstock is, as I say, the biggest one, and they mainly have a subscription model where someone can have 25 downloads a day for $199 a month, I think it is. And the photographer gets between 10 cents and $1, depending on how much the buyer actually paid. You know, you've got to trust Shutterstock to some extent. You don't know how much the buyer's paid, but their model is a percentage of the revenue that they obtain. The enhanced license, which is this product one, usually the income to the photographer would be somewhere between, say, $20 and $120, something like that. And that's for use on a product. So if someone is, as my example here, put my little cat on a bag of food, then they would have had this more expensive license to actually use the image in that way, to use the image to sell a product of their own. So we started with this is $1, you know, good value. Is that what the market assigns to our photos? It's actually a bit less than that. Across my entire portfolio at the moment, the average income per image sale is 80 cents. So on average, every time one of my images sell, my average is 80 cents. But actually, I get an awful lot of 10, 12, 15, 20 cents, but then some $200, $250 sales from time to time. And so the average represents a very wide range of prices. And that could be for the same aim. So, you know, the same image. It's to do with what agency they buy it from, what are they using it for, is it on a product, you know, all those sorts of questions. So if you're getting into stock photography, you need to sort of accept that people are going to pay 4 cents for one of your images. And some people get really worked up about that. They do say, I'm not going to sell my images for 4 cents. I had to travel here and it cost me this. And to my mind, it doesn't matter what the individual sale goes for. It's what it earns in total that I look at. So if something goes for 4 cents, well, it's gone for 4 cents, and maybe the next time it'll be $100. So you've got to have a mindset that doesn't value your work based on how much someone is paying to use it. So what can you sell? Well, I think there are 3 categories of things. There are people, there are places, and there are things. I don't tend to do people. As we were talking at the beginning, maybe before we started, I do take pictures of myself in some of my images, but largely I take things and places. And I'll come on to some of the reasons why, but it's just more complex working with other people. And I'm not sure I'm that good a people photographer. So, do the things that you like and you feel comfortable with. I'm often asked about the legal aspects, and this is where you're saying I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding of the law in the US and many other countries as well is that there's no general right to privacy in a public place. So if you're a person standing in a public place, you can take a picture of that person. They've no right to privacy if they're in a public place. Animals have no right to privacy at all, unless they're really famous, like Lassie might have been, if anyone can still remember the dog Lassie. Copyright buildings, statues, and as I say, a person can be taken from a public location, and that can be used on your own website. It can be sold as a fine art print by you. But there's a legal word, publishing, that brings potential issues. And publishing is actually, the publisher of an image is the one at risk of lawsuits. It's not actually the photographer. The photographer takes the picture, and as long as they don't tell lies about whether someone in the picture has given their permission and things like that, it's the publisher is the one that is at risk of being sued. And the publisher is someone that basically makes it available to a large audience. So putting it on your website doesn't count as publishing. Selling it as a print doesn't count as publishing. But if it was on, you know, the Washington Post website, which is obviously a clear sort of publishing, that's where this publisher thing comes in. And there are two categories of image that are generally used. The first one is called editorial, and that's for news-related stories, educational textbooks, things like that. And the permission from the subjects is not needed if it's an editorial use. So people can, you know, take a picture of someone, and as long as it's being used for a news-related story, they don't need to get the permission of that picture, of that person. A commercial usage doesn't mean that you are being paid. It means that someone is using it to advocate for a position, a political position, or, you know, something like that, or a product. And when it's a commercial usage, any person that's recognizable must sign a model release. Any product that's recognizable must be released by the owner of that, or the owner of the design of that product. Buildings are a bit less clear. That some modern buildings are either copyright or trademarked, maybe, but it's a bit of an iffy area, the whole question of buildings. And the releases, just to cover that, is just a legal document which gives the photographer the right to publish the license, the likeness. Model release for people, property release for buildings, statues, that sort of thing. And the stock agencies require a release from me, the photographer, to protect themselves and obviously their customers. They never say who the picture is of. They just need a copy of the release itself. So someone buying it doesn't know who the person is. They just know that a release has been signed by that person. So a typical editorial image would be this one. It's obviously got Air France and they own the logos. It's got people there. It's got cars. But it's a newsworthy picture. It's something that someone would use when they're talking about St. Martin and aeroplanes flying low over the people and that sort of thing. So that's a clear editorial image, and no release is needed for it. This is also editorial use. Here's some people walking, I think, on Atlantic City, Ocean City and the boardwalk there. And so if you had an article about the issues of obesity, then you could use this picture and these people wouldn't have to give their permission. It was a public place and they were just walking about in the public place. But if the publisher used it to promote slimming products, then they could be in trouble. These people could, you know, sue them saying, well, you know, we've never used your slimming products. We wouldn't approve of that. So it's that usage that actually creates the, you know, potential legal jeopardy, not the image itself. So again, this was one of my images. And when I uploaded it, I said, I've got no model release. I've got no property release. This is for editorial use only. And that basically puts me in the clear as far as a lawsuit is concerned. And there's actually a big market for editorial images, whether it's, you know, pictures of credit cards or stores and, you know, brands and all sorts of things that, you know, happen to get into the news. And newspapers don't like using images that come from the manufacturer themselves, because it sort of seems like they're promoting the product. But if I take a picture of that product, then it's, you know, not the manufacturer that's sort of pushing it, it's just me that's taken a picture of it. So just taking pictures of products, especially newer ones, is something that you can do. It's not ever so exciting, and it's pretty boring, as is going around taking pictures of storefronts. But, you know, there's a market for that sort of thing. This is a commercial usage image, because the house is the one that I used to have in Haymarket before we moved to West Virginia. And I removed all of the things on the truck that would identify the company that it belonged to. So I don't know if you can see that on your screens, but the name has disappeared, and, you know, various markings have been removed, so that there's nothing that now says who that truck belongs to. And so other companies, here's one in Florida, can use that image, you know, whether ethically they're supposed to say, browse through our portfolio of projects when they didn't actually do my project, I don't know. But they're using two of my images there as part of their irrigation and landscaping website. So when a model release is required, well, obviously here, the person is identifiable, and it's me. But here they're not. This is just a back view of people. The words white water are just generic, you know, it's generic words. It doesn't describe any particular company or place. And so someone, this old Irwin Lodge, can make use of this image to advertise their activities. Again, you could say, well, they're located somewhere near Yellowstone and Grand Teton, and this was taken in Pennsylvania, I think. But, you know, that's up to them to decide whether they want to fool their customers with this image. But that's commercial usage. No people are visible in that one. I was talking at the beginning about, you know, taking pictures of yourself. You never know where images are going to turn up. So here is that picture of the, you know, me drinking the beer, but now it appears I'm Daryl, a self-proclaimed sex god, whatever that means. So yes, I do see myself, and you've got to have a.
Let me be the first to offer you congratulations.
Yes, that's right. I've got to dig down inside myself or whatever. So, okay, that's, you never know where you're going to find your images. So how much can you earn at this sort of thing? Well, the last survey I saw was about 600 stock contributors back in 2014. And the average earnings in the year were $17,000. But the median was $4,000. You know, someone was either lying or way up the top at 400,000, which means if the median is 4,000, that's if you line them all up, that was the person in the middle earned $4,000, which means that the majority of them don't actually earn very much. And I think that's there's a lot of people just dabbling in it and maybe making, you know, $1,000 a year or $2,000 a year. You've actually got to treat it as a job that you focus on, not necessarily a full-time job, but treat it as a job, because when I come on to how do you actually do it, some of it is quite boring and can be time consuming. So you've got to, you know, have the right mindset that I'm going to do this seriously, not just sort of play at it and, you know, hope that these images sell. So this is my little picture from 2008 to now. So there was a rapid growth at the beginning, and some of that is the good old days of stock photography. Then a sort of a period from 2014 to 2017 maybe, where it well, to 16, where it dropped. I started doing more video, and the red on the top of the bars is stock video, which I'll talk a little bit about. And 2020 actually just about beat the previous years, and the scale, I don't know how visible it is, but right at the top is $40,000. The next one down is 35,000. So it was just over 35,000 in 2020 from the licensing of all these things. And agencies spread across many agencies. And so the red one at the bottom is Shutterstock, then there's iStock Photo, Adobe Stock, Adobe, obviously the makers of Lightroom, Photoshop and the others, bought a company called Photolia maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and turned it into Adobe Stock. And they've been doing very well. They've got a good reputation amongst contributors for actually caring about the contributors to some extent. And as you can see from the purple bar, that's the third up from the bottom, that's been actually growing reasonably well. And last month, December, I actually earned more on Adobe Stock than I did on Shutterstock for the first time. So that's an up and coming one. Then there's a site called Canva, which is more for designers to design their designs online, but it needs lots of bits of stock photos to put those designs together. Alamy is a biggish European stock agencies, the orange one. That blue one is is actually called Others. It's just a collection of even smaller agencies. And then there are ones called Dreams Time, 123 RF, Deposit Photos, Big Stock Photo, Pun 5. And so I think I'm currently on about 16 or 17 agencies, something like that. And I've got a lot of images. The top chart is the number of files per agency, and you can't see the numbers, and neither can I, but it's about 16,000. So the tallest bar is just over 16,000. It's probably something like 15,500 images and 500 videos.
Wow.
And the graphs are how those have grown over the years. So over on the left-hand side, it's at 2,000, and at the right-hand side, it's the top line is 16,000. And so it's just a steady year by year, trip by trip. I add images, and pretty much every month I add images to these agencies. The reason they're different is that the one at the top is pretty much takes everything. Some of the agencies reject things if they're too similar to one you've already got online. The red one, the green one is Adobe Stock, and they don't really take general editorial images, and so there's a more restricted set of my portfolio that goes to Adobe Stock. But as you can see, it's a continual think of something to take it up, describe it, upload it, and so on. So I've many images on many agencies. But why so many agencies? So I've got 27 sites, but I actually submit to about 17, of which 5 of those are for video. So the 17 includes the 5. And the reason is that, first of all, you never know where an image will take off for some reason. So if you look at my cat, which is very popular, the vast majority of its earnings have come from one site, from Shutterstock. If I look at Adobe Stock, which is further down the list, it's made $9. On Shutterstock, it's made 3,481. And so would I have known that? If I'd only been with Adobe stock, I would have only got $9 for it. And so spreading your images around between the different agencies increases the chance that they, for some reason, do well in the search on that agency and suddenly start to sell. And that's what happened with the cat. It started to sell, it ended up higher in the search order, it sold some more because it was higher in the search order, and it's a self, perpetuating thing.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
We have a question here. Are you on Getty?
Yes, it was called iStock Photo, and Getty bought it. Getty has got a whole set of different, you could call them portfolios, I guess. They've got some which are their old exclusive images. So way back in the past, you could only go on Getty if you were exclusive to them. You couldn't sell your images anywhere else. And so they've still got that as part of their assets. But the largest number of images these days have come from what was called iStock Photo, is still actually called iStock Photo. So it's Getty stroke iStock Photo is how I describe it.
Do agencies ask if you're exclusive, or is that just a?
No, there still are some exclusive agencies, but and I know a couple of people that have submitted some of their images to them, but they're putting everything in one basket, and they're not doing well in those exclusive agencies, to be honest. So I only send my images to non-exclusive ones.
Okay.
I don't. Don't bother with anyone that's exclusive.
We may be getting a little bit ahead here, but two questions. One is, do you load photos to each site separately, or is there a tool that you use to help you manage loading to multiple
I'll talk
sites?
about that, yeah.
And then the other question is, what is your process for keywording images?
Okay, I'll talk about that as well.
Okay.
Okay. The other reason that I submit to so many agencies is that the buyers, a typical buyer, doesn't shop around for the lowest price. A typical buyer would work for a company, and a company would have an account with an particular agency, and they would be told to go to that agency unless they really couldn't find what they need there. And this is an example. Here's my picture of the airplane, and this one is sold 40 times for $323. And on some sites, the one at the bottom, it's sold on Dreams Time, and I got 35 cents. But the one at the top, Alame, which is a European stock agency that provides more help and support to its clients, and has some of the bigger European newspapers as clients as well. It's sold 4 times on Alame, but I got a total of $292 for it. So even though someone who went on Alame could have gone to Dreams Time and got it for, for me, 35 cents, they went to Alame because that's where they go. That's where their company has an account, and that's what they do. So I'm sure there's some people that shop around, but largely or generally speaking, people don't go from agency to agency. It's just too much effort creating accounts and all that sort of thing. So if someone sells at a high price, then I get a high price. If someone sells cheaply, then I get a cheap price. But I don't think the high price person goes to the cheap site, or not very often.
Okay,
back in 2007.
Sorry? You came in. It says, do you get requests to create certain types of images or certain genres? Or is that completely up to you?
Not really. Some of the agencies say we have searches for these and this, this particular set of search terms. Maybe we don't have enough of those, but it's generally quite generic. And to some extent, there's an advantage to being one of the early suppliers of an image, and I'll come on to this in a few slides. And so waiting until, you know, more people are supplying those images puts you lower down the search order, in effect. So there's an advantage in thinking of your own concepts and getting, you know, getting them uploaded early. So as I was saying, back in 2017, my sort of most popular images on Shutterstock were travel type images. I mean, definitely some things. There's a light bulb and there's a US 1040 and things like that. But travel images tended to be the most popular ones. When I come to 2021, then it's coronavirus, it's election, it's you know, all the problems that we've been through. That little screen, sorry, there's a picture of a smartphone on about the fourth row, which I think has got Telegram and Signal, the two apps that are, you know, encrypted and much more secure. There's checks coming from the US Treasury for the, you know, stimulus checks, eviction notices, voting by mail. Oh, this little up on the top row, my background, which has sold for $260 since I put it there in May. So the things have definitely changed, you know, that what sells in one year is definitely not, you know, what sells in all of the years. The question, how, you know, how do you track all these earnings? There's a nice application called MicroStocker Pro, which goes to about 14 of the agencies that I submit to, and downloads not only the value that, you know, the income that's sort of building up there, but which specific image is sold and the thumbnail of them. And so I can, you know, see at a glance every day, every month, look at, you know, an all-time totals, which is what this is. And you can't see it, but at the top, I've had 275,441 downloads of images, you know, since I started this. So you know, over 250,000 downloads. So there's certainly a lot of my images somewhere out there in, you know, in the world. Are there alternatives to stock agencies? Well, you can do a self-hosted stock photo site, try and sell them yourself. And there are also some, what you could call brief-driven sites, where someone says, I have a need for this photo, which I guess ties in a little bit to the question. Can you take this from me? There was quite a nice site called Image Brief, but that's now closed. And there's one called Snapwire that has been asking for images that DoorDash are going to use on their app. And the two at the bottom, Great Wall, are pictures that I took for them. And I think, you know, professional photographers would laugh at this, but I was given $30 to buy the food and $40 to take the pictures. It's sort of almost like taking pictures for, you know, just to be fed. But I got to try the food. So these are local restaurants. So I got to see what their food was like, and someone gave me $40 to do it. So here's my pictures on the DoorDash app of this Chinese restaurant. The self-hosting one, there is and it's still around, a WordPress-based theme that you can use to build your own agency. It's got a search engine in it. It sort of tries to attract high Google rankings for images. It doesn't really cost anything, you know, $5 a month for hosting. And of course, you can keep 100% of the sale costs. But I've put a lot of effort into building one of these, and it's a very poor return, because the people that turn up maybe found you on Google, but they don't want to pay. They're not the sort of people that expect to pay for photographs. They expect, you know, just to get them for free. If it's a company who do expect to pay, they go to an agency because they go to an agency. So it always seems attractive to try to sell your own photos, but it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And my site crashed. It had a database corruption and I gave up on it. So a lot of effort, a lot of heartache, but very little reward for it. So what's involved in doing this? Well, you got to think of interesting subjects. That's the easy starting line. Process them in Lightroom, which is what I use for bright, contrasty feel. Move to Photoshop to remove logos and people and more complex cloning. Back to Lightroom to add a title or a caption and a more detailed description, and then 30 to 50 keywords. Save as sRGB JPEGs. And actually, I don't think I'd say any more than this, but there's a good tool called Stock Submitter, which takes the images and you upload the images once to their servers, and they then log on to, I think it's currently about 14 or 15 different agencies, and upload them to the agency, and then go to the agency website and complete anything that needs to be done on the website to complete the submission. So sometimes you've got to, you know, press this button and press that button on the site to complete the upload. And so it now is as simple as I, you know, select which ones I want to go, I press the button, they all get uploaded using FTP to their server, and then everything else is done by them. So it does cost me 10 euros a month or something like that, but it saves a tremendous amount of effort and annoyance going to different sites and remembering what you've got to do and fiddling about with it. So to answer that question that was asked earlier, this company or application called Stock Submitter is how I get both images and videos to all of these sites. And that they do that last line, they complete the submission on the agency side. They in effect do that automatically as well through the application. So here's an example. On the right hand side of my 30 or 40 keywords to describe this, I've got the title of it. I put a caption, which is like a longer description of it. And what you've got to do with keywording is try to think what someone who was going to use this image would be searching for. So it's a sort of, you know, it's easier for a particular place than it is for a more abstract image. But, you know, what would someone be searching for? Obviously, Washington and White House and railings and bars and the garden and the flag. And so it's the, what is it that someone is looking for when they, you know, want that sort of image? And that's the boring part of this, because many photographers like taking photographs and they like developing them and, you know, getting them to look good, but they hate sitting there, you know, putting these keywords in. There are tools that help here. There are some 2 or 3 different websites where you can put in 1 or 2 words and it will come up with thumbnails of all of the stock photos that have got those words in it, and you can select the ones that, you know, look closest to the one that you're working on, and it pulls together the common keywords from those images. So it, you know, you can go quite a way into creating this set of keywords by looking at what other people have done, but you don't want to be exactly the same as other people. You want to also think of 1 or 2 words yourself to add to that. So, you know, there are ways that you can make this easier, but this is still, you know, the boring part of the task. So what sort of photos can you take? Well, everything. Travel shots, $1,686 for this. That's quite a nice picture of Washington, D.C. This one of the New River Gorge Bridge has sold quite a number of times recently because they've just turned this river gorge into a national park. And so this one, I see it on, like, the, if anyone remembers the Yellow Pages, it sort of appeared on the front of the Yellow Pages. That one's earned $1,000. This sort of just straightforward record shot of Morgantown, and with the university and the town centre, is a, nothing artistic about it at all. It's just a picture of Morgantown, but that's sold 244 times on 201 downloads. As I mentioned before, the ones that sell tend to be quite bright and lively, because, and the other point about this is that you need to be able to recognize what it is from the thumbnail, because the first thing that a buyer might see is a page of thumbnails. And so yours needs to at least, be recognizable, and they might think, oh, that looks interesting. So largely when you're looking at images, also look at them at the thumbnail size and see whether it still is telling the story that you wanted it to tell. When you've got a good subject, take many shots of it. Pictures of Bibles and glasses, and pictures of a light bulb. This one has earned $925 from 1,223 downloads, and it's nothing other than a picture of a light bulb, and it's isolated against black. And here it appeared on a Deloitte, their Deloitte website. So even, silly shots like a light bulb have got opportunities for sale. Cleaning glasses, Christmas tree light bulb, threading a needle, a bag of ice, $2,073 for a bag of ice. That bread one was me trying to do a, gluten problem, of how dangerous gluten was for some people. You can composite things, take the lamb out of one picture and make it sort of a more attractive picture. This was, just my lawn after I'd cut it, that I then put a blue sky against, and then I thought it'd be nice with the sun. I don't know whether the lamb adds an awful lot to it, but you can just make up images. You can manipulate images. They can put whatever message they want on the piece of paper. And then this anticipating the news. So way back before Bitcoin became really popular, I bought some, I wish I bought some real Bitcoin, but I bought some pretend Bitcoin coins from China, and photographed them against computer screens. I bought these Litecoin ones. I bought some Ethereum coins, and then created a whole series of different images. And that little set of things, because I was quite early in coming up with a concept, I was earned $1,700 or thereabouts in 18 months. I then saw increasing numbers of stories about opioids in the US, and the problems of epidemics and OxyContin and all those sorts of things. And down in my basement, because I don't seem to throw things away, was a bottle of oxycodone, the generic version that the dentist had given me when I had a root canal a long time ago, and I never took them. But that came out, and that was photographed, and then it was photographed. I'd made videos of it. I put it against the US flag. I did various macro sort of images, and that lot has sold for $8,000 in the last 48 months or so, and still does, even though there was a peak of the story when various companies were being sued, but even now that they continue to sell. The whole coronavirus thing, as I mentioned, I was very early in doing this. I write a blog and it's called Backyard Silver. I'll mention it right at the end. But in January of last year, I wrote a blog post for I've got some subscribers to it, to say that I thought that there was going to be a big issue with this new virus that was moving around in China, and that it would cause a lot of issues around the world, and that we should start taking, photographs that tried to illustrate it in some way. So this is not a political thing, but the government at the time said they didn't know there was an issue. Well, in January, I told my readers that we should really start to create these virus images. And I did. I was actually a bit slower than I wish I'd been, but I did start creating a whole series of different images. I ordered some face masks from Amazon, and there's some pictures of me there with black mask on. I ordered some little glass vials and to pretend blood into for tests and so on. So you've got to, spend a little bit of money to make up these, these concepts. But as I say, that's sort of earned 2,600 in the 10 months or so since I first created these. Stock video is, it's both up and coming and it's harder. It's up and coming, especially for 4K videos, because there are a lot of HD videos on these stock agencies, but not as many 4K videos. A stock video tends to be around 10 to 25 seconds long. And an example would be, I've got a little dolly thing that rotates around my opioid bottles. So it's a very clear macro shot, but the device sort of rotates around them. So there's some movement there. And really that's all they're after. They're after something that's moving a bit, that shows it's not just a still photo, it's actually a video. There's less competition because it's harder to do. You've got to have continuous lighting as against flash. You've got to have something that moves the subject if it's a product. I've also taken, I've been on a number of cruises in not the last year, but the years before that, and I've taken images of the ship going into rough water. So I've got on the front with my tripod and taken videos of the ship going through rough water. And those sorts of things sell regularly because they're both realism and a concept at the same time. It's sort of like, sailing into rough seas, that sort of thing. So I do both travel type things as well as product type things. And I've also done some, and this is where the green screen behind me comes in. I've pretended to be a businessman and I've got my face mask on and I'm having my temperature taken, and then I composite it against a sort of an airport background. The background is static, but people don't really notice that. And so those sorts of things are there to illustrate the problems of travel in a coronavirus sort of environment. So I struggle more with stock video, understanding how best to illustrate the concepts. I do better with a photograph than a video, but I do keep trying to improve with video as I go forward. Whew, fine art. Fine art America, well, I call it fine art, is selling my nicer looking photographs. And there's multiple sites. There's 500px, there's Fine Art America, there's Society 6, there's Redbubble, there's Zazzle, there's a UK print on demand site called Photo for Me. I've focused really on Fine Art America. That was my first one. Society 6, which sells both prints and lots of products that have images on them, and this Photo for Me, which is the UK site, and they've earned a reasonable amount of money, you know, $3,000, $1,000, $400. But it's a small part of the total that I think Don mentioned right at the beginning. So it's something that I enjoy doing because there's like a buzz from someone buying your print and putting it on their wall, but it's a small part of what I earn from stock photography in general. So Fine Art America, I had about 750 images. I've been trying to increase that recently. I think I've now got about 1,000, and you can put them into collections. So I've got like a best-selling images, West Virginia, sunsets, what's next? Panoramas, I think, Hawaii, the UK, digital art. So anything that I would quite like to have on my own wall, that's what I put onto Fine Art America. There's a $30 fee. And once you've paid your $30 fee, you can basically put as many uploads as you want. And the sales are sporadic but pleasant. So you basically make a profit over and above the cost of them printing and shipping the print. So they do all the fulfillment. You basically put the images there, you describe them obviously, but if they've got the keywords in, that's read automatically. And you then are able to set your own markup. So you can, you know, say, well, on the very smallest print, I want $20. If someone wants a 48 by 24 inch metal print, I want $400, or, you know, whatever the number is. And people do tend to price them quite high. There seems to be a market for someone likes the image, they're going to put it on their wall, and okay, it costs $400, but that's what they want. You know, that's the image that they've decided on. I did try for a time putting low prices in to see whether there was a bargain basement shopper there, but I didn't sell anything. So I put my prices up again and, you know, then have these sporadic sales again. So what sells there? Almost every subject I think can sell, but the big question is, how does the buyer find your version of that subject? And I find that these are actually all images that I've sold there. And as you can see, most of them are places. They're specific places that someone would search for because they had a reason. The various buildings that, you know, with a clock tower on are the building down at West Virginia University that, you know, someone who's a graduate maybe wants something to remind them, well, I'll go and search for West Virginia University or this particular building. So I think someone looking for a gift or a memento of a vacation or, you know, some experience would search specifically for that. And that's what that's where I try to be, that I've worked out what they're going to search for. If it's an abstract image, and there are definitely, you know, quite a lot of abstract images, like a blurred seascape. I've got, you know, some what I think are quite nice blurred seascapes, but what is it that someone is searching for? And if they simply put blurred seascape, what's, you know, the chance of mine going to come up? So I think images of places are the most likely to sell. You know, this is only my thinking process, I could be wrong. And also I see some people that stick all their stock photos there. And so you've got, you know, to take a silly example, images of my opioid bottles. Well, who's going to buy a picture of an opioid bottle to put on a, you know, wall art? And it's the same, I think, with many of those images. Why on earth would someone have that printed and put it on their wall? So I always try and ask myself that question. what is it that someone is going to do with this image? So that's my advice on Fine Art America. So can you start now? I started in 2008, in the good old days, as people now say. And definitely it's harder. There's more images, the more contributors, the lower prices, you know, especially if you're a new contributor. But I did track the sales of all of the photos and videos that are created in 2020, and I created about 1,000 images and videos last year. And those were downloaded 7,000 times for $6,000. And I was definitely lucky on some of them. I definitely caught a wave with some of my virus images. But if I hadn't thought of it and put them there, you know, the luck means nothing. You've actually got to have the images there to end up being lucky. So could you have started in January last year and earned $6,000? It would have been hard, but you know, with my new images, that's what I managed to, you know, earn from work in the year 2020. So should you do it? I don't know. It's certainly not for everyone. There's a lot of work and some disappointments. Images will be rejected. How much you're getting per image probably will drop each year, but it's a steady stream of income that continues. It's more of an annuity than a wage in that sense. You can set your traveling equipment against tax if you do it as a business. You can find fame and fortune with, here I am again, chocolate eaters more likely to be depressed. So I stayed away from chocolate ever since I saw this particular picture.
And I'm calling BS on that. That was awesome.
So that was my, this is my last slide. So I have written a book about this, which is now in its, might actually be in its 5th edition. I think this one slide is out of date. I think it's in its 5th edition. But I also blog regularly, at least three times a month, 4 times a month, about stock photography on backyardsilver.com. So, you know, I try to give back to the community. That's the right way to put it. So that's my last slide. So if I end the slideshow, we should go back to the pictures, shouldn't we? Do we go back to the pictures, or do I have to stop sharing my screen?
Stop sharing your screen. Yep. Okay. I got one question here that was sent to me via email. It says, I've heard of a couple photographers talk about internal stock programs, that is providing photos to a company to license as their own, especially if they have unique products or tools. Have you heard of anything like that? I mean, that's a new one on me.
Yeah, no, I haven't. And I don't know. I mean, to some extent, that one Snapwire that I mentioned with DoorDash is a little bit like that, in the sense that companies can say what they want, and I picked up some food ones because they were close to me, but there are other ones as well, and the image then belongs to the company once you've taken it. So to some extent there are those types of companies around. And there's also one called Wirestock, WIRESTOCK, where you send your images to them and they keyword them and upload them and submit them and take 15% of the revenue. So an easier way to sort of get started is a company called Wirestock. I don't use them. I think it's very hard for someone who didn't take the picture to keyword it properly. They tend to use artificial intelligence and generically keyword it. And then I think, well, it's not going to sell because no one's going to find it. So
right.
Yes, you can use them, but I don't.
Okay. Do you ever put watermarks on your photos?
No, you can't. When you send them to a stock agency, you can't have any watermark on it. They put a watermark on their site, which
Right.
obviously is not there. And it's the same with Fine Art America. You've got to get into the mentality that people will steal your images, but they're the people that wouldn't have paid for it anyway. And so on Fine Art America, I don't put a watermark there, and someone could take a screenshot and do something with it, but they wouldn't have bought it anyway. So what, why put off a proper buyer to avoid someone, occasionally stealing one of mine?
Okay, it says, how do you know that a building is copyrighted?
That's very difficult. To some extent, there are some like famous ones, like the illuminations on the Eiffel Tower, so everyone knows that. It tends to be more modern buildings with a unique design. And quite often the stock agency will reject it. They will, you'll put it up and they'll reject it, saying you need a property release. Well, of course, you're never going to get a property release.
Yeah, I would think if the building's identifiable in the picture, whereas if it's just like a glass wall that there's so many glass skyscrapers or whatever, you might be fine. But
or if it's just part of a cityscape, that no one really cares about that, because it's not a picture of that building, it's a picture of the city, and the city happens to have some building in it. So take them, and if they get rejected, they get rejected.
All right. Now, have you ever, somebody says, ever wonder what you might make as an hourly rate? So obviously you've put a lot of time into this. I tell people sometimes, it's like the money I've made on photography, I've been better off getting a part-time job at Home Depot. But so what do you?
That's very difficult, because if I stopped now, let's say I said, well, okay, I'm going to retire now, I've had enough of this stock photography. This coming year, I'll probably earn, I don't know, $35,000, and the year after I'll earn $30,000, and the year after I'll earn $28,000, and I put no effort into it. So, how much time do I spend on this? Probably a third of my time, I would say. When I started, I was, full-time employed. And so I used to do it in the evenings and, sometimes at weekends and things. And I still am a consultant. I still do technology stuff. So I'm not full-time at this by, any means. I would say about a third of my time, but I haven't done that calculation because I'm not sure how to really cover future earnings against that.
Right. Okay. One thing I was just going to throw out when you were talking earlier about, like you mentioned statues, and there's a popular statue here in town that is the Einstein statue over on the grounds of the National Academy of Science. And a lot of people, put their kid on Einstein's lap and take the picture. That's fine. But I'm here to tell you that they do go after photographers that try to commercialize that. They've even gone after, my wife used to work for the Academy, and they've even gone after employees that like published a calendar that they gave away as gifts because it had a picture of that. So, it's when you're taking a picture of someone else's art, they're obviously, whether, I think with the Academy, they probably commissioned it. So therefore, they're the owner, they have the copyright on that art. And, you don't always get the.
I think that, from what I understand of the law, I think they're on shaky grounds trying to go after someone who, say, sold it as a print, because it's on, you can stand on public land and take it.
Well, actually, you can't, because it's up. You have to actually go up onto their, like, there's like a
the plinth. Well, in that case,
it's obscure. If you shot it from the street, I think you'd get the back of its head through the bushes.
You're right. So people fall into that trap. If you go on someone else's property and then take a picture, then you're got to follow whatever rules they may have set for that property. So yes, it's very important that you're on public land if ever you wanted to sort of take this stand. But it's not worth taking a stand. I took some pictures inside the you may remember we were once invited from the Manassas Club to the Catholic church down in Washington, D.C., whatever, I can't think what its proper name is. And we were invited on a tour, and they said, take photos. We, really like you to take photos of everything that's beautiful in here. And so I did. I put them on websites. And I got a letter from their lawyer saying, I've got to take these things down. And of course I did. I didn't sort of go back and say, well, hang on, you invited us here. So, people don't want to sue you. If they want them taken down, then take them down. It just, I wouldn't give it a second thought.
Okay, there's a question here. Says, will people go to I think they mean loyalty-free images instead of stock? Thanks very much. I'm not, Yi, if you want to just unmute and ask the question, I'm not sure that we're clear on that.
Hi, thank you very much. Yes, just Russia typing not so clear. I just want to know if people want to find a good quality of images, they may go to royalty-free.
Royalty-free.
Royalty-free, I'm sorry, yeah. So what's the competition in between these two? Because they might go there instead of...
Yes, that's because people misunderstand what royalty-free means. Royalty-free doesn't mean it's free of charge. It means that it's a particular type of license that you got to buy. It's a horrible name, but it's it's what the industry uses. So stock agencies sell royalty-free images or sell images under a royalty-free license is the proper way of saying it. But there are free stock agencies. I can't think what one's called now. But there's
Google it.
Yeah, there's 3, 4 of them where photographers have uploaded their images to a license that allows the company to give them to anyone else without attribution, and they can use it for any purposes. And so those are a real, drag on the industry. And what annoys me is when I see photography websites, websites for photographers making use of, say, this image was from Unsplash, which is one of them. And you think, they're writing for photographers and then they're making use of free photos and doing these same photographers out of some income. So yes, that's one of the biggest potential issues going forward, that photographers are happy for exposure as opposed to money.
Okay. Now, what site do you recommend for keyword recommendations? I Googled this earlier because the question came up earlier, and I saw a lot out there, but do you have a specific
yeah, I use one called Stalker. I am for Michael, STOCKER.com. But there are or it's IMS Stalker or IM Stalker. I quite like that because it's fast. It shows the images. You can, pick the images that look like yours, and so it's a nice, fast, easy to use site. But as you say, there are others, and they're all running off the same basic source of information.
Yeah. Marty wants to know, can you use pictures of paintings that are 75 years or older?
Yes, on both Fine Art America for your own prints or for prints that you sell, as well as stock agencies. Some of them have really got to be told that it is now out of copyright. That they don't necessarily know how old it is. And so it's a bit more hassle sometimes, but you're right. Once something is out of copyright, then you can put it on a stock agency. And I've put some, picture of an old picture of Morgantown that was done in the 1880s or something on Fine Art America, because how else would someone get a print of that? Where would they find it? How would they get it printed? So yes, it can be done, and they can sell.
Okay, I'm all caught up on questions. Anybody else have any questions? You can just unmute and ask.
Well, I wanted to ask how we find your blog.
His blog?
Yes.
Yes, it's
backyardsilver.com.
yeah. The idea was making money in your backyard. That was the why I called it Backyard Silver in the good old days. But yes, it should come up under backyardsilver.com.
Okay, great. Thank you.
It does. I typed it in a few minutes ago. And he's got a lot of information there, and he's been doing it for years.
12 years. Yes, 12 years.
Yeah.
One day I'll retire.
I imagine you've bought more than a few lenses, or you could go buy.
Yes, I'm looking at this Sony.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good being able to set your flight and your hotel, and so I go on a vacation and I can set those sorts of things legitimately against tax, because wherever I go, I take photographs and sell them. And there isn't a requirement to show a profit on every individual trip. So, my accounts always show a profit on the business. I earn more than I ever have in expenses.
Do you have any trips planned during this COVID environment?
Well, I've had my first vaccination a week ago. So
Steve lives in West Virginia there.
Yeah, that's right. We're organized. And I've got another one in 11 days time or 12 days time. So we're thinking about it.
Where are you in West Virginia, by the way, Steve? Because it seems like you have good internet. Where do you live in West Virginia?
Morgantown.
Morgantown.
Yeah,
okay.
Home of West Virginia University. Yep. So it's a nice little town. It's a lot quieter than Northern Virginia. Yeah.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So for like your travel photos, how do you encounter any issues with countries like Cuba, or not really North Korea, but those kind of places with very high restrictions on
Yes, I once went to Equatorial Guinea, which is a very sort of dangerous sort of country. And I was told in advance that, be careful about taking pictures. So I did buy a small camera that was much less obtrusive, and I got some, good photos, but I didn't take photos of the president's palace and things like that. So you've got to be careful and not stick out. But I don't tend to go to places like that anymore. I think Hawaii is a lot nicer.
Well, my former partner at Roadrunner, she used to do Cuba tours, and she always had a Cuban guide with her, and when you have that local knowledge, they'll keep you out of trouble.
Yeah. So don't, and especially going around at night in places, I'm always thinking, how safe is this? Is this photograph really worth, really worth putting myself at risk?
You just need to go to one of those, like a gym, and find like the biggest guy in the gym, and I'll pay you to walk around with me tonight.
Take around, yes, yeah. We have used, I think they call it Tours with Locals. There's a website, I think it's called Tours with Locals, where you sign up with someone and they take you on a designated tour. And I did that in Greece. That worked very well because they know all the local places. They can tell you the stories behind them. So that sort of thing is worth doing, and you can set it against tax.
All right. Well, anything else, or before we say goodnight to everybody?
that's also an advantage of bed and breakfasts.
Yes, that the person knows the local area and can often point you to places that haven't been photographed before, maybe, or aren't on stock agencies.
All right, Steve, one question here. What resolution do you upload in for? In other words, do you upload full resolution, or do you upload a reduced resolution with the idea that these pictures will be used online?
I used to upload at 4,500 pixels on the long side. And then as I realized that the buyers of images were not as clever as maybe I was making them out to be, they might think, hang on, that picture's bigger than that one, so it must be better. And so I've started uploading now at 5,500, but I don't upload the full resolution because downsizing hides, some small issues. There might be a bit of noise there, or it may not be completely in focus or something. And so a bit of downsizing helps hide any issues. So 5,500 is my current number. But people, even though, when they get downloaded, the agencies downsize them to what someone actually is paying for. But if someone wanted a product, so a print that's going to be on the side of a product, they do want a high resolution image, and they may want to crop into it as well. So these are not just for web use, they are for any sort of photographic use. So 5,500 is my current standard.
And what about like Fine Art America? Wouldn't you do just your full?
No, I upload the full size image there, because they look at the size of the image and determine how big it can be printed. And so, if I upload a 7,500 pixel image, then it can be printed, I don't know, 84 inches or 96 inches wide or something like that. So with Fine Art America, I simply upload the full size image.
Okay. All right, last chance for questions.
Do you ever upload raw images?
No. Occasionally, and it hasn't happened to me, I've seen someone be approached by the stock agencies to say that the person wanting the image would like the raw one, and could that be uploaded? So I don't think in general people either allow that or expect it, but could occasionally come and ask you for it. But that would be for some additional sum of money.
Right. And one thing too, I have a friend that was shot for Getty back in the good old days when they actually made real money at that. And there were times where he talked about, they would want TIFF images, which, it's going to be a 16-bit image versus an 8-bit image as a JPEG. Mm-hmm. So it depends on its use, but these days we're living in a 72 dots per inch world. It's like that's everybody just wants pictures for online. Mm-hmm. I've done that. I've done portrait shoots with must be 50 different models at this point, and not a one of them has ever asked for full size images.
No, and they're so big these days. So 5,500 should meet anyone's needs.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Do you occasionally modify or reuse the same images? Color, Photoshop, adding components to sell for different purposes?
Yes. Those surfboards at the beginning are obviously all modified. I also play about with like digital painting and compositing different things together, more for the fine art stuff than the stock agencies, although I have sold some of these painting images on the stock sites. So I play about with that, but it's a very small part. It's more for fun of what can you do with this image, rather than as part of my day-to-day job.
All right. I I think we're up here. Okay. This is great. Thanks a lot. Yep. You've had a lot of comments that are just people thanking you, Steve.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
I want to thank you for your time and your wisdom in sharing it. I really enjoyed it and appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much.
All
Thank
right.
you for
Thanks,
all
Steve.
staying with me.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. Good night. And I will get this. It should be available for download later tonight. I will send you an email through Meetup. So when you RSVP through Meetup for this, you will, as long as you're subscribed to what I believe they call organizer messages, which I think you actually have to actively unsubscribe to those, you'll get a link later. And if something happens and by tomorrow you don't have a email with a link, message me and I'll get it to you. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Okay,
Thank you.
good night.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.